It's going back to the mid-1970s, I believe, because he was killed in 77, I believe.
Janet Sheen saved their house while her husband was nowhere to be found. For decades, Martin Sheen seemed like the perfect family man. But behind closed doors, something dark was happening. He would tell Janet he was one place, then disappear somewhere else entirely. The family went broke. They almost lost their home. Janet worked multiple jobs just to keep the lights on while raising 4 kids alone. Then, in 2022, Sheen revealed what he was really doing all those years. His secret nearly cost him everything that mattered. Martin Sheen was born on August 3, 1940, in Dayton, Ohio. But his arrival wasn't normal. Doctors had to pull him out with forceps, and that crushed his left arm. His shoulder bones broke, his arm ended up 3 inches shorter than the other, and he was left with a condition called Erb's palsy. It limited how much he could move that arm for the rest of his life. One of his eyes also got pushed higher than the other because of the damage. But instead of hiding it, he made it part of his acting. That slight limp, those movements, even the way he flipped his jacket in the West Wing, they all came from that early trauma. And oddly enough, it made him stand out in Hollywood. His parents were both immigrants. His father, Francisco Estevez, came from Spain. But at first, America didn't want him. Because of anti-Spanish feelings after the Spanish-American War, they turned him away. So he went to Cuba and worked in sugarcane fields for years. When he tried again, he lied and said he was Cuban, and that finally got him into the U.S. He settled in Dayton, where he met Marianne Phelan. She had come from Ireland, from a town called Borrisokane. Her brother, Michael, had fought in the Irish Civil War with the anti-treaty IRA and was locked up in Dublin's Kilmainham jail. Martin grew up with that history of rebellion on both sides. His parents had 12 kids, but 2 died as babies. That left 10 children growing up in one tiny house with just 3 bedrooms. Life was hard. Francisco worked at the National Cash Register Company as a factory inspector, but money was always short. Then, when Martin was only 10 years old in 1951, tragedy hit. His mother died at just 48. With 10 children and barely enough income, there was talk of sending the kids to different orphanages. But the Holy Trinity Catholic Church stepped in. Thanks to them, the family stayed together. Around the same time, Martin got sick with polio and had to stay in bed for nearly a year. The family couldn't afford it, but they had no choice. To help out, Martin started working as a golf caddy at age 9. He walked 4 miles to the club, carrying heavy bags for $1.75 each. The job exposed him to the ugly side of wealth. Rich golfers cursed, made racist jokes, and often asked caddies to cheat for them. At just 9 years old, Martin had seen enough. He gathered the other caddies and started a strike. Some reports say he was 14, others say younger. But either way, it happened in 1954. They chose Ladies' Day, knowing the club would be full. The women had to carry their own bags while the boys stood aside. It only lasted 3 days, but it made a point. Martin was fired, but he was later brought back. Members specifically asked for him. That early act of standing up for what's right stayed with him forever. By his teens, Martin was both rebellious and gifted. He was smart, but didn't care much for school. He missed most of his senior year at Chaminade High and even got arrested for marijuana and credit card fraud. Still, he was the star pitcher on the baseball team and got a scholarship offer from the University of Kansas. But he didn't want that life. His father wanted him to go to the University of Dayton. Instead, Martin threw the entrance test on purpose. He didn't just fail. It was deliberate. He wanted to be an actor. Decades later, in 2015, the same university gave him an honorary degree. It was emotional. In a way, it finally gave his father the dream he never got to see fulfilled. To chase his dream, Martin took on odd jobs. He saved every dollar. Eventually, he convinced a Catholic priest to loan him money so he could go to New York. He got there in the late 1950s with barely anything but a fierce drive. He joined the Living Theater and spent 2 years there. His first professional acting role came in 1961 with the play The Connection. He played a heroin addict and got paid just $25 a week. But the role got noticed. He was living off clerk jobs during the day and acting at night. The play later moved to London, giving him his first taste of international attention. In 1963, things took a dark turn. He tried out for West Side Story on Broadway. He didn't get it, not because he wasn't good, but because of how he looked. They said he didn't fit the part, even though the show was about Puerto Ricans. That rejection crushed him. He had no money, no home, and ended up sleeping on subway trains in New York just to stay warm. Still, he managed to land a role in a sci-fi TV show called The Outer Limits that same year. That small win kept him going. In 1964, he got his first major TV role in The Defenders. He acted opposite George C. Scott, but the experience wasn't smooth. Martin clashed with the director. He didn't like the script changes and argued that they hurt the character's message. The arguments got so heated that people thought he might be fired or even blacklisted from TV. But he stayed on, and that same year, he made his Broadway debut in Never Live Over a Pretzel Factory. Then came the big one. In 1964, he starred in The Subject Was Roses on Broadway. Critics loved it. The play ran for 738 performances. But on opening night, he was terrified. He had barely rehearsed. At one point, he even forgot his lines and panicked. He thought about walking off the stage, but somehow pulled through. The show's success earned him a Tony nomination. And when it was made into a movie in 1968, he reprised his role and got a Golden Globe nomination for Best Supporting Actor. In 1965, he landed a role on the popular TV show As the World Turns. For 5 years, from 1965 to 1970, he played Jack Davis. It wasn't just a job, it was stability during a time of struggle. Every day, he memorized huge amounts of lines and worked long 12-hour days just to keep the character alive. His role wasn't simple either. He played a medical researcher working on a youth serum who also claimed to be someone named James Stenbeck, who had supposedly died. That kind of twist made his character unforgettable. More importantly, millions of viewers across America saw him on their screens every week. That kind of daily exposure slowly turned Martin Sheen into a familiar face and a dependable actor. 2 years before that job ended, in 1967, he stepped into the world of film for the very first time. The movie was The Incident, and it was anything but gentle. Sheen played one of 2 young criminals terrorizing people on a New York subway. The film was made with just over $1 million, and the story was harsh. His character beat an old man unconscious for $8 and showed no guilt while tormenting the passengers. Sheen's eyes, his tone, his stillness, it was terrifying. What made it worse was how no one on the train tried to stop them. In the end, only a wounded soldier stood up, using his broken arm in a cast to finally fight back. That kind of violence, so raw and personal, showed that Sheen wasn't afraid to go to dark places as an actor. It was a shocking debut, and people remembered it. 6 years later, in 1973, Sheen stunned the world again with Badlands. This time, he played Kit, a young killer who traveled across the American Midwest with a girl played by Sissy Spacek. He killed without hesitation. But what made it so disturbing was how calm he seemed while doing it. Kit never looked angry or scared. He acted like killing was just another thing a person might do. And somehow, Sheen made this cold-blooded character look cool. His charm and calmness confused the audience. You weren't sure whether to fear him or admire him. That strange balance, pulled off so naturally, marked Sheen's true arrival in serious Hollywood acting. The next year, in 1974, Sheen took on a very different kind of role. It was in a TV movie called The Execution of Private Slovik. It aired on March 13th and became one of the most watched made-for-TV films ever made. Sheen played Eddie Slovik, the only American soldier to be executed for desertion since the Civil War. Out of 40,000 soldiers who had deserted during World War II, Slovik was the only one killed. Sheen's performance was so powerful he was nominated for an Emmy. But he didn't like the idea of awards. He said actors shouldn't be compared. Interestingly, his own son Charlie had a small, uncredited role in that film as a child at a wedding. That film showed another side of Sheen, serious, emotional, and willing to question history. Around this time in 1975, a major Hollywood moment happened. Jaws hit theaters and became a sensation. It was the birth of the summer blockbuster. Some say Sheen was offered a role in the film, but turned it down. There's no clear proof of that, but just the idea of it is telling. Had he accepted, his career might have taken a very different turn. Jaws went far beyond anyone's expectations. It made Steven Spielberg a star and changed how movies were released. Whether Sheen had the offer or not, 1975 was a year that shaped Hollywood forever. The real turning point came in the late 1970s. Martin Sheen was cast in Apocalypse Now, one of the most intense and troubled film shoots in movie history. The production took 238 days. The movie was shot in the Philippines, and the conditions were brutal. On March 5, 1977, Sheen suffered a heart attack while alone in his hotel room. He crawled through the jungle for help. At just 36 years old, he nearly died. The movie was already 16 months behind and $20 million over budget. Director Francis Ford Coppola kept Sheen's condition a secret, afraid that insurance companies would shut everything down. Sheen spent 6 weeks in a Manila hospital. His brother, Joe Estevez, stood in for him during distant shots. When Sheen returned, he was 30 pounds lighter and still emotionally wrecked. He later admitted to drinking an entire bottle of rum a day during filming. Then came the infamous mirror scene. It was Sheen's birthday, August 3, 1976. He had been drinking for 3 days straight and showed up completely drunk. Coppola turned the camera on and let him go. Sheen exploded with rage and punched a mirror. Blood went everywhere. He had cut his thumb so deeply it needed 40 stitches. He bled for 12 minutes and lost 2 pints of blood. The room was covered in it. 6 cameras filmed the entire thing. It took 14 hours to shoot that single scene. The mirror cost $800 to replace. The room needed professional cleaners. But that scene became one of the most iconic openings in cinema history. In 1979, Sheen was cast in The Final Countdown, a sci-fi film shot on a real aircraft carrier. But just 3 weeks in, on September 15th, he showed up so hungover he couldn't stand or remember his lines. In front of 300 people, he vomited on the ship's deck. The Navy threatened to shut down the film. Production stopped. A Navy doctor gave Sheen fluids, while co-stars Kirk Douglas and Catherine Ross staged an intervention. The delay cost $47,000, and Sheen was kept under close watch for the rest of the shoot. He finished the movie, but the incident was another reminder that his personal demons were becoming dangerous. By 1982, Sheen was preparing for the miniseries Kennedy. On November 22nd, exactly 19 years after JFK was killed, Sheen stood on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. It was 12:30 p.m., the exact time the bullets were fired. As he looked out the same window Lee Harvey Oswald used, Sheen began to panic. He collapsed with a heart rate of 180 and couldn't breathe. Paramedics rushed him to Parkland Hospital, the very same hospital where Kennedy had died. He stayed there for 3 hours, recovering from the panic attack. The emotional weight of the moment was too much. It took 6 weeks of therapy before he could begin filming again. In 1983, Sheen took on the role of Greg Stilson in The Dead Zone, playing a dangerous politician with nuclear ambitions. He decided to use method acting and stayed in character 12 hours a day for 6 weeks. But the toll it took was horrifying. For 8 months after filming, Sheen had night terrors. He woke up screaming several times each night. He began sleepwalking and sometimes attacked furniture in his sleep. His wife found him talking about nuclear war while unconscious. Sleep studies showed his mind was stuck in character. He lost 18 pounds and needed sleep aids for over a year. Even psychiatrists said he had developed temporary dissociative episodes. It took 2 full years of therapy for Sheen to return to normal. Between 1999 and 2006, The West Wing became one of the most powerful shows on American television. But there was one moment that made even longtime fans stop and stare. It happened during an episode called Two Cathedrals. Martin Sheen, playing President Bartlett, stood inside the National Cathedral and suddenly turned his anger toward God. And this wasn't in English. Sheen launched into a furious monologue in Latin, much of it unscripted, where he shouted things like, "To hell with your punishments," and even said, "To a cross with you," which was his way of telling God to crucify himself. Then, without warning, he stubbed out his cigarette right there on the cathedral floor. That act alone got the entire show banned from filming there again. But the scene was so powerful that James Lipton later called it one of the best moments in all of American TV history. At the same time, Sheen wasn't just making bold moves on screen. He was getting arrested in real life, again and again, for protesting nuclear weapons. One major arrest happened on January 27, 1987, during a demonstration at the Nevada test site. That date marked 36 years since the first atomic bomb test. Sheen was taken in on charges of intent to commit a crime and had to pay a $5,000 cash bond. But he wasn't alone. Within just 2 hours, 65 more people were arrested. A few months earlier, on November 18, 1986, Sheen had also crossed a white line at the same facility and was arrested with 70 others. They were handcuffed with plastic ties and taken 60 miles to a small town called Beatty. That protest came just 3 days after the 12th underground nuclear test of that year. Each arrest risked 6 months in jail and a $250 fine. While fans saw Sheen as a calm, noble president on screen, NBC executives behind the scenes were growing nervous. Their leading actor's activism was starting to worry them, especially if it might interfere with filming schedules. But Sheen wasn't only creating tension. In 2004, something unusual happened on 2.5 Men. Sheen guest starred as a character named Harvey, Rose's father, who ends up having a fling with Evelyn, Charlie's mother. It would have been funny on its own, except that in real life, Martin Sheen was Charlie Sheen's father. And their relationship off-screen was rocky at the time. Charlie was already dealing with personal troubles that would later explode in 2011 when he was fired from the show. The show ended up predicting some of that chaos. After Charlie was fired, the writers killed his character off-screen by saying he was pushed in front of a train. Then, in the series finale, they brought him back just to drop a grand piano on him from a helicopter. Sheen's role on the show was one of the last times father and son worked together before things truly fell apart in public view. By 2010, something changed. Sheen starred in a film called The Way, directed by his son Emilio Estevez. The movie told the story of a father walking the Camino de Santiago in Spain after his son died on the trail. Sheen played Tom, a grumpy doctor who picks up his son's ashes and decides to complete the pilgrimage for him. But what made the film special wasn't just the script. This project helped Sheen and Estevez reconnect in real life. As the characters on screen made peace, so did the father and son behind the camera. The film didn't break records at the box office, but it touched people deeply. With a quiet soundtrack featuring James Taylor and Nick Drake, it explored grief, forgiveness, and the journey of healing. Critics said it showed just how strong the bond between father and son can be, even if that bond had been tested in real life. Then, in December 2015, Sheen's family faced another emotional moment. At the age of 75, he had to undergo quadruple bypass heart surgery. It wasn't an emergency, but it was serious. At the time, he was filming Season 3 of Grace and Frankie on Netflix. His son, Emilio, said the operation required great courage, strength, and humility. It happened in a Los Angeles hospital, and after some time in ICU, Sheen gave a thumbs up in a photo taken just before Christmas. He was expected to return to work by early 2016. His wife, Janet, and their family stayed close through it all. And despite the seriousness of the surgery, Sheen bounced back with the same energy that had carried him through decades of acting, protesting, and parenting. Still, not everything behind the scenes of The West Wing was peaceful. During the early 2000s, trouble started brewing over pay. Martin Sheen was earning $300,000 per episode, while Rob Lowe was making only $75,000, even though he was one of the original leads. In 2002, Lowe quit the show. Sheen admitted he was shocked and heartbroken. He'd known Lowe since he was a boy and saw himself as a kind of mentor to him. By that point, other cast members like Bradley Whitford and Allison Janney had managed to get raises, but none matched what Sheen was making. Lowe's exit was handled with care on screen, allowing his character to leave gracefully by March 2003. But off-screen, the tension left a mark. That same year, every main cast member except Rob Lowe got an Emmy nomination. Even in 2021, Sheen kept working. In the film 12 Mighty Orphans, he played Doc Hall, a county doctor who had spent decades helping orphans without ever asking for money. Doc drank too much, but had a big heart. His friendship with Coach Rusty Russell, played by Luke Wilson, gave the story its emotional weight. The movie focused on how a group of orphaned boys became football champions, but Sheen's character helped remind everyone that even broken people can lift others up. For Sheen, who had spoken openly about his own battle with alcohol, the role felt personal. It wasn't just a character, it was a part of his truth. Martin Sheen met Janet Templeton in an art class, and from the very beginning, things were different. Their first date wasn't a dinner or a movie. Instead, they snuck into a museum exhibit that was off-limits. It wasn't just bold. It was the perfect start to a love story that would last more than 60 years. On December 23, 1961, they got married. He was wild, she was fearless, and they were both young enough to think the world would bend for love. Somehow, for them, it did. Even today, after 64 years, they're still together. And not just in name. Sheen says Janet is the scariest person he's ever met. Not because she's mean, but because she never lies. Her honesty became the one thing he knew he could trust, even when everything else was falling apart. They had 4 children: Emilio, Ramon, Charlie, and Renee. All of them became actors, just like their father. But Sheen wasn't always around to see them grow up. In the early 1970s, while filming Badlands, Sheen missed the birth of Charlie. That wasn't the only moment he missed. Through the 70s and 80s, there were school plays, birthdays, and family dinners he never showed up for. always off filming, always chasing the next role. By the time Emilio had his first child, Sheen was 43, and he finally started learning how to be there, really be there, for the next generation. But when he wasn't acting, he was protesting. In the 1980s, Martin Sheen turned into a full-time activist. He got arrested 66 times for civil disobedience. He even called the day he was arrested with Father Daniel Berrigan in 1986 the happiest day of my life. But it wasn't all joyful. Sometimes Janet would be sitting with him at a romantic anniversary dinner, only to get up and go bail him out of jail. One time, in 1989, he got arrested 13 more times before even making it to trial for blocking access to a federal building. The judge finally sentenced him to 400 hours of community service. So Sheen went to work at a soup kitchen, and he never stopped. Even 24 years later, he was still showing up. In 2012, while filming Who Do You Think You Are?, Sheen found out something that shook him. His uncle, Michael Phelan from County Tipperary, wasn't just Irish. He had been in the IRA during Ireland's War of Independence in the 1920s. Sheen visited the exact cell in Dublin where his uncle had been locked up. He even feared his uncle might have helped assassinate Michael Collins, but the records showed he was in prison at the time. That discovery brought a wave of relief. It also helped him understand why his mother, Mary Ann, had been sent to America, likely to escape the violence of that time. But the darkest chapter came during the making of Apocalypse Now. The year was 1977. The shoot dragged on for 238 days in the brutal heat of the Philippines. Sheen was drinking every single day, trying to numb the pressure. Then one night, he collapsed in his hotel room with a massive heart attack. He was 36. He crawled across the floor, alone, trying to find help. Doctors said he had a 50% chance of surviving. His left artery was completely blocked. While the production paused for 6 weeks, Sheen was fighting for his life. But Coppola kept the cameras rolling, even during Sheen's breakdown. That mirror-punching scene in Apocalypse Now? That wasn't acting. He was having a real breakdown, and it made it into the film. He got sober, but not right away. In fact, for the first 20 years of their marriage, from 1961 to 1981, Sheen lied to Janet over and over. In 2022, he finally admitted it. He said he was a dishonest husband and an unreliable father. He would tell her he was one place when he was really somewhere else, usually drinking. Janet knew. She nearly left him more than once. But she didn't. She stayed. And he credits her with saving his life. Ironically, when he finally got sober, it almost didn't last. In 1986, he took a role in Shattered Spirits, a film about an alcoholic father. He thought he could handle it, but playing that role pulled him back into the darkness. Within weeks, he had relapsed. It got so bad that Alcoholics Anonymous members had to show up on set and hold emergency meetings just to keep him from falling apart. The production nearly shut down. After that, Sheen made a promise to himself. Never again would he use his real trauma for a role, unless he had the support to handle it. That same year, something else nearly broke him. The family was broke. All the drinking, all the lost roles, it caught up to him. They were close to losing their house. He hadn't paid the mortgage in months. Janet had to step in again. She worked odd jobs, handled all the bills, and somehow kept the roof over their heads. She saved their home while raising 4 kids and holding everything together as Sheen spiraled. In 1981, a trip to India changed him forever. In Calcutta, he saw children starving on the streets. For the first time, he understood what it meant to live without. He walked through slums in silence. When he came back to the U.S., he walked into a church and confessed everything: the lies, the alcohol, the pain. He cried. He says that moment is when he found God again. That trip didn't just change his faith, it saved his marriage, his family, and his future. By 1987, he finally got sober for good. And by 2025, Martin Sheen had stayed sober for more than 40 years. He was 85. He still remembered waking up in a hospital bed in 1977, with Janet sleeping on the floor next to him, calling a therapist in New York because she didn't know what else to do. She stuck with him even then, even when he had nothing left. In 2022, Sheen looked back at his past and said something surprising. He regretted changing his name from Ramon Estevez. He said he wished he'd had more courage back then to honor his roots. He never legally changed it. All his documents still said Ramon. And he was proud that his son Emilio refused to change his name to Sheen. The family name lived on. Then in 2024, during an NPR interview, Martin Sheen said something else that surprised people. As a Catholic, he said he fully supported same-sex marriage. It shocked some of his conservative fans. But Sheen said that for him, human dignity mattered more than any rule. Even at 84, he wasn't afraid to speak his truth, even if it cost him support. And maybe that's the story of Martin Sheen, a man who lied, failed, broke down, disappeared, and came back again. A man who faced death and addiction and came out on the other side. A husband who almost lost his wife. A father who missed too much. But also a man who learned, who changed, who kept showing up. Not perfectly, but fully.